Right now, delighted to welcome Labour's Shadow Attorney General, Lord Charlie Faulkner, to the show. Good morning to you, Lord Faulkner.
Good morning, Julia. How
Love,
lovely to speak to you again.
Lovely to speak to you. Can we turn our attention first up to what's going to happen in terms of US-UK relations? Obviously, I mean, intrigued as a lawyer of many years standing. Your thoughts on Donald Trump's his views on whether or not he's actually lost the election or not? Possibility of all these legal threats as well. Talk of him having to be dragged kicking and screaming by the Secret Service out of the White House on the 20th of January when Joe Biden is inaugurated. In terms of with your lawyer's hat on, what do you make of all of that?
Well, normally you would need some evidence to try and set aside an election. And in the absence of any evidence, it's very difficult to believe that Donald Trump's got any basis for trying to set the election result aside. The fact that he hasn't got a basis is made all the more compelling, I think, by the fact that even before they'd really started to count the postal votes on Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, President Trump alleged fraud. And it felt like not that he's got evidence of fraud, but this is a strategy he's adopting to try to undermine, without any basis, the election result. So at the moment, with my lawyer's hat on, I would think there's not much in that. That is somebody who's lost, who's not willing to accept that he's lost.
No, indeed. We shall see how this plays out. But yes, it's all rather embarrassing and difficult. Will it be embarrassing and difficult in terms of our future dealings in the UK with a Joe Biden presidency? Yesterday, you tweeted out, if the Prime Minister wants a relationship with President Biden, ditch the law breaking part of the internal market bill. Recklessly putting the UK beyond the pale might have seemed okay on Monday. It sure doesn't look that way now. The US have shown President Trump the door. What has changed on that front?
Because now there is a president of the United States of America who is unequivocally backing the Good Friday Agreement 100%, but perhaps more significantly is 100% backing the rule of law in international relations. What the United Kingdom government under Boris Johnson is doing is saying we won't necessarily comply with the withdrawal agreement, and in particular the Northern Ireland Protocol. If that's what you say about agreements you enter into with other countries, then those countries that believe countries should stand by their agreements won't want to deal with you. And international cooperation, when one thinks about finding a vaccine, when one thinks about what needs to keep the economies of the world going, when one thinks about fighting climate change, it's international cooperation that's required. And for us, the United Kingdom, particularly so, when we're looking for new trade deals as we leave the European Union.
Well, we know that Joe Biden has said that there's no prospect of a US-UK trade deal unless there's an EU-UK trade deal. But again, that is what Boris Johnson says he wants, and we're still told, another 7 days. Again, how many times have we been told that until that trade deal comes forward? But ultimately, I mean, some of the guests we've been speaking to, many commentators have pointed out that the fundamentals of a US-UK relationship go far beyond any personal relationships or animosity on the opposite side, and we are very much militarily, intelligence-wise, foreign policy aims. Boris Johnson very aligned with Joe Biden on climate change, unfortunately, and lots of these big issues. Our two countries are aligned. There is still not maybe the special relationship for the United States, but there is still a special relationship, isn't there?
Yeah, very much so. And I completely agree with that analysis that you've just done. However, there's a particular issue now, which is that we want a trade deal, if we can get one, with the United States of America. There will be very, very many countries that want to talk to the new president and do deals with the United States of America as Trump withdraws and President Biden takes over. We are likely to be much lower down the pecking order of getting that trade deal with the United States of America unless we make it absolutely clear that we are the sort of country that both supports the Good Friday Agreement and stands by our agreements. If the Lords take out the law-breaking clauses today, we are doing Boris Johnson a favour. I would strongly recommend to him that he stops digging in the hole that he's found himself in of law-breaking, which makes you very much the outsider and the person that other countries like the United States of America will not put high on their list of priority countries.
But we have seen, didn't we? I mean, when this all emerged at this particular clause in the internal market bill that everyone made a big fuss about, that on numerous occasions the EU has seen many countries breaching international agreements they've signed within the EU. And if there is a trade deal with the EU, that supersedes this anyway. No one sensible and sane, speaking without their party political hat on, thinks this is going to undermine peace in Northern Ireland. When you talk about Joe Biden as fully behind the Good Friday Agreement, I mean, apart from the people in balaclavas, who isn't fully behind the Good Friday Agreement?
Everybody is. I think you're so wrong, Julia, when you say this does not undermine the position of the United Kingdom. Short, medium and long term, this sends the message that whilst Boris Johnson is Prime Minister, you can't rely on the United Kingdom to stand by its agreements, even one as important as the Northern Ireland Protocol, which underlines the Good Friday Agreement. So you are so wrong when you think this makes no difference. I really ask the government to think again. If the Lords removes the law-breaking clauses, then they have the opportunity just to put this terrible policy to one side.
Okay, well, we shall wait and see. It does look very likely the Lords will do this. And if they do, the good question mark is whether the Prime Minister puts it back in again or not. Let me talk to you about also about some of the reactions we've seen from your side of the political divide to the election of Joe Biden, because we've seen, I mean, across the board, so many people in the Labour Party celebrating and delighted that Joe Biden has been elected, of course, as a Democrat. No love lost for in terms of Donald Trump at all. I mean, I think among many actually Conservatives as well. But did you not think it was a little bit strange? So many people were querying Donald Trump and his questioning of the election and saying whether or not he felt that his refusal to accept the outcome of the election. When a lot of these people, including your colleague David Lammy and others, a lot of these people have spent the last 4 years trying to basically question an election, a public election here in the UK, refusing to accept the 2016 referendum result, refusing to abide by that, questioning it, challenging it in the courts, claiming it was all bought and done for by the Russians as opposed to ordinary British people casting their vote as they saw fit, trying to overturn it with a second referendum. Isn't it a bit hypocritical for the large cohort of the Labour Party and the front bench of the Labour Party right now to accuse Donald Trump of doing something which they spent the last 4 years doing?
Well, I do think that things are absolutely different. The position in relation... Well, because there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever for the assertions that Donald Trump made. Indeed, they were so...
There isn't. No, there isn't. There isn't. But there wasn't any evidence on the Brexit front either.
Let me finish. And indeed, so unevidenced were they that all of the networks in the United States of America pulled away from an address by the President of the United States when he said that they had that the election had been procured by fraud. They believed that they shouldn't broadcast that to the United States of America because there was no evidence of it. So I really think you haven't got much basis for saying my colleagues are unwise to attack President Trump for saying there's something wrong with the election when he's got no evidence for it.
No, I didn't say that. No, Charlie, I didn't say that.
No, I think you were implying they shouldn't attack him.
No, I wasn't at all. I think what he's been saying is absolutely absurd. I'm no fan of Donald Trump. It was blatant lies what he's been saying. I'm saying it's a bit rich for them to accuse him of doing something which he's done, which they themselves have done.
Julia, you then say it's somehow wrong to do that because throughout the period post-2016, a number of people said, let's look and see whether the Russians funded part of the Leave campaign. Let's look to see whether or not the funding arrangements for each of the campaigns were wrong. I don't think that is remotely a wrong thing to call.
Let's have a second referendum because we don't accept the result of the first one. You don't think that's wrong?
You're making 2 points, don't you? Don't accept the result of the referendum in the sense that the referendum should be set aside because it's technical failures. Some people said that. I don't think that in any way disables them from attacking President Trump for attacking the result of the...
It doesn't disable them, but it makes them hypocrites because they did exactly the same thing over Brexit.
Not remotely. It is so clear that President Trump doesn't have a basis for that. To then say they are disabled from making that point because some people said we should investigate bits of the 2016 referendum is such total nonsense.
No, virtually the entire front bench of the Labour Party they stood on a campaign basis to have a second referendum because they didn't accept the results of the first referendum and wanted to override it.
You've switched your ground very dramatically.
No, I said that in the first point. Anyway, I said that earlier.
We've moved on from the
question. You don't think it's hypocritical at all?
Not remotely. We've moved on anyway from all of that.
Have we? Let's talk about, just finally, the government moving on. Another Monday, another U-turn we've had over the weekend over the free school meals issue. Marcus Rashford asking for help for the poorest families to make sure their children are fed during school or holiday time. Do you think this is the right thing for the government to do, or if they've claimed that it's not necessary, it's not needed, should they have U-turned?
Of course, they should have U-turned, and the regret is they didn't do it before half term, and it's a sort of indication of the disconnection of this government from what's actually going on in the ground. Obviously, the government is not remotely responsible for the arrival of the pandemic, but they should be more acute and sensitive to what the effect of it may be in relation to people's lives, and they only get to these positions when they're forced to by the media, rather than making judgments of their own as to what the right thing to do is. Yes, I welcome the U-turn. It should have happened a lot earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. Always good to speak to you, Lord Faulkner.